why the war happened in the first place.
I think Putin could no longer afford to rebuild Russia as if it is during the Second World War.
About the potential of Russia being part or a member of NATO.
Soviet Union as the evil empire.
How does Russia balance relations with China and other global players?
Brainwash the future generations.
Good day, everyone. My name is Muhammad Ihsan, and I'm here with Professor Naser Tahboub from the University of Jordan School of International Studies. So, Professor, for today's topic, we're going to talk about the Ukraine-Russia war that is entering its third year. So, I think the audience will be wondering why the war happened in the first place.
Oh, this is really an important question, In order to understand why this war has happened, you have to go back to 1989. In 1989, the Soviet Union collapsed. And as a result of that, we ended up with a unipolar world, meaning what? One superpower. And a big vacuum that took place in Eastern Europe, where those nation states that were part of the Soviet Union were left, to decide their future and their course in history. Not only that, but it was left up to the NATO allies and the Western world to fill that void that has happened and to move in and have a great deal of influence in Eastern Europe. And as you realize, a few countries became members of the NATO alliance. Now, Ukraine is a special case. Why? Because of its, being on the border of Russia. It is territory that represents for the Russians a threat that any outside intervention into Ukraine would be like a direct intervention into the domestic affairs of Russia. And that could not be tolerated. Now, the Europeans, NATO, and the West were actually playing an important role in influencing the future direction of Ukraine and with the direction, the alliance that it would create and potentially join the NATO alliance. That is a red line. It's unacceptable for Russia to allow its backyard, its next door neighbor, part of its strategic defense that is required to defend against aggression from the outside, to have the West come in and the NATO alliance to build bases and place some ballistic missiles, whether they are short, medium, or long-range missiles, in their backyard. This is unacceptable. And I think that, the West and the Western world, the international community, decided not to listen to the messages and the warnings that were sent by Putin to the international community. But it reached a point where I think Putin could no longer afford to have that influence and the meddling in the affairs of Ukraine and the next door neighbor. So the decision was to move and to occupy the country.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Doctor. So NATO, its purpose is to basically contain the Warsaw Pact of the Soviet era, or the period of the Cold War. And after the Cold War ends, Putin actually proposed or have a talk or a discussion with the President of the United States, I think back then is Ronald Reagan, about the potential of Russia being part or a member of NATO.
Yes, indeed. But you see, the problem is that, in the United States, every time we get a new administration and a new president, there is, there seems to be a change in the foreign policy making machinery and the outlook towards China and Russia. And Ronald Reagan was one, that saw the Soviet Union as the evil empire. And it was part of his mentality and his strategic thinking is to contain Russia and to limit their influence within Eastern Europe and Western Europe. So the idea of containment was still there, despite the fact that you are very right. There was a golden opportunity for Russia to join the Western world in the NATO alliance and to bring better relations, to ability to work together. They were talks about, limiting weapons of mass destruction, disarmament. There was a good reception in Russia towards the West in general and NATO, but that really needed wisdom of men that could, incorporate Russia, bring it in to ease the tensions between those countries in Europe and in the international community, particularly the superpowers. So, there was that need. Unfortunately, the Reagan administration did not take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And we lost the golden opportunity to bring more the world towards peace among nations, cooperation among cultures, rather than conflict between cultures and superpowers.
Yes, all right. I think my next question will be Russia's geopolitical strategy. So I have one question here for you, Doctor, which is how has Russia adapted its global strategy post-Ukraine-Russia war, especially in light of the Western sanctions and shifting alliances?
Yes, indeed. You can only answer this question in the context of post-1989. And the break of the Soviet Union. Putin, when he was elected president, this man was able to pull Russia's resources together and to rebuild that fragmented country and that country that suffered from, the breakup. And, he was able to overcome the problems that existed in Russia, namely financial problems, almost bankrupt. He was able to redirect and regroup his industries together, where he was able to export oil, to bring in resources, to rebuild Russia, as if it is during the Second World War. That was amazing, because this man with an iron will, he brought back his country as an international key actor in the international system. Not only that, but he earned the respect of the international community, including the United States and the Chinese. Not only that, but he has managed to open bridges with the Chinese. He enjoys excellent relations with China. They respect him highly. They uphold him with a great deal of respect. He was able to look for opportunities, like, for example, his ability to work with the Iranians and to buy from them drones, and to trade with Southeast Asian countries, to bring in about the resources despite the sanctions, to bring in funds and resources to help Russia. I think, he is a man with an iron will. He's got nerves that are made out of steel. And that is translated in his ability to resist and fight a war, despite that the Western world, and particularly the Europeans, NATO allies, and the United States, pumped billions and billions of dollars into supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia. Yeah. But he stood firm, and despite, we're not really taking sides on who's right or who's wrong, but it's a war that is an existing war, and he was able to hold on. Yeah. That shows that this man is not he's a pushover. He is a tough Russian who has served in a number of important positions, including the director of intelligence. So in reality, he's there. Yeah. The international community, the Americans, the Chinese, they've got to deal with him. The Ukrainians, and they have to also find means and methods to communicate, to negotiate. The idea that only through a war and through the supply of arms to roll back the Soviet forces from Ukraine, or the Russian forces from Ukraine, is a one point of view. But so far it has not worked. Yes. There must be other means and techniques and methods to bring the parties together, to find a compromise solution, to attempt to bring an immediate ceasefire, and to stop the suffering of all people in the region, the Ukrainians, the Soviets, the Russians, and so forth. We keep saying the Russian Soviets, but it's the Russians actually.
Yes.
So, there has to be an end to this war as soon as possible.
Yes. Before I go straight to the second question, I would like to ask, like, what is NATO's intention for making Ukraine a member in the first place?
I'm going to tell you that, in my own judgment, is that, and it was my hope.
When I know that this will actually provoke Russia.
Yeah, look, the issue is that after the Second World War, we were celebrating that, here, that was the defeat of Nazi Germany. We were hoping that, we will be able to promote liberal democracies around the world, human rights charter, and so forth. But I think that still today, you will find men who are ideologically motivated, and those who are ideologically motivated think that they are entitled to force their ideology down the throats of others. This is not the way it's going to work anymore in our world. You cannot push others to believe in what you believe in. You have to respect others, their culture, their values, their way of thinking, their ideology, and so forth. And you have to coexist with the rest of the powers of the world to work out, your differences, to cooperate in the pursuit of development, happiness, well-being of nations, moving away from weapons of mass destruction, strategic weapons. It is time, high time, for us, after the Second World War, after the massacres and the killing that has taken over during the Second World War, and the wars, the bloody wars, and the genocide of people in the Second World War, we need to move beyond that to allow the people of this world of ours to live in peace, in harmony, to provide for the well-being of the societies, the countries in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America, where people can have enough food security, they can have education, they can have healthcare, and so forth. And I think that those two countries need to work together. Now, those who are motivated by ideology and feeling that they are still living in the 1940s and 1950s, they need to wake up. It is no longer possible to achieve that objective, which is to motivate all of your foreign policy and to put your resources in the same manner that you have done during the 1940s and 50s, and to roll back the Iron Curtain. There is no Iron Curtain anymore.
Yeah.
There has to be cooperation. There has to be communication. You cannot ideologically, brainwash the future generations that will ultimately lead the conflict between these superpowers. It is not possible. We have to cooperate in this our world of ours, whether you're Americans, Chinese, or Russians. At least for us, we in the third world don't really need wars. In the developing countries, we don't need to be part of any conflict in the international system. We are tired and sick and tired of being proxies. And we would like to see, cooperation among the superpowers. Ultimately, that would benefit the development around the international system and to bring about harmony and peace.
Okay. All right, Professor, I think we're going to jump straight to the next question, which is about, okay, I'll start with the debates among scholars. Are we living in a Pax Americana, which is the unipolar world, or are we now entering a bipolar system or bipolar world? Or some scholars even argue that we are in a uni-multipolar. I mean, there's the US, and then there is Russia and China, which makes it a multipolar as well at the same time. My question will be, what role does Russia see for itself in shaping a multipolar world? How does Russia balance relations with China and other global players?
Yes, you could argue and you could spend hours, saying from a theoretical point of view, whether we are a unipolar system, bipolar, or multipolar system. There are three superpowers now that exist in our international system. And those three superpowers are there. You have to contend with them. You have to deal with them. You have to work with them. Not only that, but they have to work with each other. They have to cooperate with each other. Because the alternative is we go back to an arms buildup. We go back to massive assured destruction.
Yeah.
The use of strategic weapons, tactical nuclear weapons, the threatening of the world's stability, and this is unacceptable. Now, what we are saying is that, and which is good, we are witnessing that the Russians and the Chinese are on good terms. Now, during the Biden administration, relations between China and the United States and China was not in the best shape and form. And now President elect Trump, is also, making a lot of remarks about his relationship with the Chinese and the Russians and so forth. We don't know. In the past, Trump and Putin had a very good relationship. We hope that this relationship that they have had and enjoyed in the past would be an important positive force in stopping the war in Ukraine and an immediate ceasefire.
Yeah.
But then again, it is not a world where one superpower, one leader of this world can dictate the terms for our international community. That is over. It is no longer the case. None of those leaders can dictate the terms and tell the others to behave in a particular way. There can only be cooperation. And the Chinese have already sent messages. They want to cooperate with the Trump administration, with the Russians. And the Russians are willing to open up and to communicate with the international community. If we can find an avenue, and the Trump administration, he said he could bring about peace in 1 hour. If the Trump administration can play a positive role in terms of, pressuring the parties to declare a ceasefire immediately, that would be positive.
Okay, Professor, since you mentioned Donald Trump, I also want to ask one question about him, which is he promised that he will immediately end the war between Ukraine and Russia. Do you think the United States still have the trump card to end this conflict?
Look, the president, promised that he could, intervene and bring about a peaceful solution to the crisis. But now, in the foreign analysis, nation states act based on their interests. And, rationally speaking, their foreign policy is based on rationalism, and they will do what is in the interest of their country and so forth. Now, it's a new administration, a new president, second term.
Yeah.
We don't know how these two men will be able to communicate. Will they be able to argue in terms of finding a peaceful formula that will stop the war in the interest of all parties concerned? We don't know. We have to wait and see. It is too early. There are promises that are made during campaigns, but they are not what followed. And we realize that, the current U.S. administration, the president-elect, is elected, and he represents a turn to the right. He represents an America, a nationalist America that is looking for America first. At least this is what we have heard.
Yeah.
Can the president manage to, answer to the calls of his own citizens, providing for the well-being of America and finding jobs, to lower taxes and to create more jobs, to create more stability in the international system? Can you do it while at the same time manage to, stop the war in Ukraine? Let's hope so. We are for dialogue. We are for communication. We are for a dignified world that has respect for human beings, their lives. All lives are valuable, whether it is Russians or Ukrainians. We would like to ask for an immediate stop of the war today.
Yes, I'll take that as a very good closing statement.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.